Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you like this video after you gave it a watch, please hit that subscribe button down below, and also don't forget to give it a like. And let's go ahead and jump into our case. Now, we all know that America has a very dark past with the oppression of marginalized groups, including people with disabilities. Creators of the carnivals, or don't come for me, freak shows, would often search out people with genetic abnormalities or disabilities such as microcephaly or ectrodactyly, which is a condition that Grady Stiles was born with. Grady Stiles was born June 6, 1937 to Grady Sr. and Edna, and he was their fourth child. Grady Sr. claimed the disorder dated back to 1840, and they came from a long line of carnival workers. And Grady Jr. became a part of his father's act when he was only 7 years old, and he began performing in shows nightly with his father until he retired. And despite Grady's deformity, he was pretty much able to do anything he wanted. The ectrodactyly caused Grady's hands and feet to form together, so his fingers and his toes were somewhat like fused together in the bone structure of his hands and feet, and they formed somewhat like crab-like features, and so that's why he was somewhat of like a carnival attraction. But despite this, he was able to pretty much do anything. He sometimes used a wheelchair, but he was able to like crawl around on the ground, and he got a really amazing upper body strength from crawling around and getting in and out of his chair and doing all of these shows. So he was really quite strong, which was a benefit for him. He was able to, show that just because he did have this deformity, that, he wasn't just stuck to a wheelchair, and that he was able to do anything that anyone else can do. But this was actually a really bad thing for his family, that he had this incredible strength. Grady married a 19-year-old woman in 1958. Her name was Theresa, and she was a survivor of family abuse from her parents and also of incest. And the couple had 3 children together. 2 of the children had the same disorder as Grady, and they often worked in shows with Grady, and they also worked in the carnival. And it's been told that Grady basically worked them really hard, his whole family. They had to, work within the carnival and helped wherever was needed, and they also would put together Grady's entire act. So he really took advantage of his family in that manner, while he just waited for everything to be put up for him. And the abuse did not stop there. Grady was a severe alcoholic. He started drinking when he was very young, and I do feel like this was a way for him to cope with some of his depression. Just by reading a lot about him, he must have had some really severe anger issues and some very severe depression, and just a lot of issues going on. I can imagine growing up in the way he did, performing shows, having a deformity like that can be really hard on somebody, and having a disability like that can be really hard. And especially during that time when people weren't understanding and there weren't so many programs for people to get help, there weren't medications, so many medications people could take to relieve pain. There's just a lot more today that we do to help people with disabilities, where back then it wasn't like that at all. A lot of people were kept in institutions and treated poorly. So back then it was much it was way, I don't want to say harder, but I feel like it was much more severe back then what people dealt with, unfortunately, with disabilities. And he took his extreme anger out on his family, especially after he had been drinking. He would often punch them and beat them and choke them, because his hands were incredibly strong, so he could choke his wife until she passed out. He would punch them in the face, bruise them up, and they often wouldn't go to school or work in the carnival the next day, because their jaw would be swollen. And Theresa's jaw, some people called her Mary as well, would often she would just have bruises all over her body, and her face would be very swollen, and he would just burst out of anger out of nowhere. He would be in his chair the family would just be like together, and he would just like jump out of his chair and start beating his family. And Mary, or Theresa, took the brunt of it because she loved her kids and she didn't want them to get hurt, so she took like the worst of it. And she really went through a lot during these years. And his anger was so severe and intense, and he would just really hurt them. And a lot of people in the carnival didn't really like him either, because he was very like verbally abusive, and he would be very rude to people. And I believe that like he would like hit people as well. He would kind of like confront people and like kind of show that his hands were very strong and that he could easily get in and out of his chair and like hurt you. So I believe that he was just very confrontational, and so a lot of people in the carnival would completely stay away from him. So it was just like him and his family in their little like trailer, and the abuse went on for years between Grady, his wife, and his children. And Theresa ended up leaving Grady in 1973 for the world's smallest man, and his name was Harry. And apparently him and Theresa really got along very well, and so she decided to divorce Grady because, clearly the situation was terrible, and she basically left without Grady knowing, with her children. And shortly after that, the kids had a great summer. The two daughters and their son, they had a great time, and she was quickly served with papers. She did not know that Grady went to court and basically had her kids taken away, and they had to go back and live with Grady. During this time, everything wasn't on the internet, and it was a lot easier to kind of do that stuff back then. And back then, I feel like things weren't so in favor of the woman, and they would a lot of times be given to the men automatically. And so, despite Grady being a terrible father and a terrible person, he was given the rights to his kids, and basically they just had to go one day. And Theresa was very hurt by this. This really made her sad for a long time, and she really struggled with that. Her and Harry ended up having a son together as well, and the son's name was Harry, but this really hurt Theresa a whole lot. This was very hard for her. The abuse in the coming years was much more significant, if you can actually believe that. He ended up marrying a woman named Barbara, and she would be there with her Grady's kids and with Grady, and Grady would beat her so bad, and he just was so terrible to Barbara as well. It was very severe, and he took a lot of anger out on the children as well. And I do feel like a lot of that, because from what I've read, Grady was very angry about Theresa leaving, especially in the manner it was done. And so Grady was much more severe to the children, especially Donna. And I feel that with Donna, because she did not have the same disorder as the rest of her family, she was treated more severe. Maybe it was like a jealousy thing, maybe it was anger because she didn't have it. I'm not really sure. Of course, I wasn't there or in his mind, but it does seem like a lot of the abuse went to Donna. He would, hit her, and eventually Donna got tired of it, and she ended up leaving in 1978, about 5 years later, and she met a boy named Jack, and they ended up really caring about each other and loving each other. And she basically hid out at his house for a while, and she basically like left Grady not knowing where she was, and he was like calling the police, like, I don't know where my daughter is. And she ended up getting in contact with Grady and saying like, hey, I'm not coming home, I'm happy with Jack, I'm gonna live here. And Grady's reaction to that was explosive. Like, every time she would call and talk to him, he would go absolutely wild on her, screaming at her, saying he was gonna kill her and her boyfriend. And he would just go absolutely like bananas every single time that she talked on the phone. So she would limit how often she called, and it would be very short, because she wanted to get away from all of this abuse, and she felt like she was inviting it back into her life by making these calls. But she did eventually call Grady and say that her and Jack wanted to get married, and he again was very upset, very angry, and she eventually like talked him down and said like, hey, I really want this to be okay with you. I don't want to like live in, fear or worry that you're going to do something crazy, that you're going to do something to hurt me or Jack. And so I just want you to meet him. We're getting married like tomorrow. So, she really sprung this on him, and he said it was okay, bring him over. And so that evening they were like out doing wedding stuff. They were like gonna go get her wedding dress at like a local mall, and Grady invited Jack into his trailer. Now, this is debated upon by, several people, of course, but some people feel that Jack went into the trailer to kind of like confront Grady and say like, hey, I love Donna, I want to be with her, and Grady just got mad. And other people say that Grady wanted to have like a heart-to-heart conversation with Jack. So it's very debated upon. I tend to believe the latter, just from seeing Grady's anger issues and how severe it was. So I definitely believe it was the second. Jack may have really said something like, well, I really love her, or something like that, but I do feel like the intention was Grady wanted him to come into the trailer. And when Jack entered into the trailer, Grady shot him, and Jack ended up dying that night. Now, while Barbara called the police, because like everybody was outside of the trailer, everyone was about to leave and go shop for this wedding dress. So Barbara, all of the kids, Jack was out there originally, then he went into the trailer. This was just supposed to be like a quick little talk. And so when they heard the gunshots, they walked in and saw Jack had been shot. Barbara called the police, and while Grady was sitting there seeing him being shot, Donna's reaction, everyone's reaction to him doing this, he was mocking her and saying like, I told you I would kill him, and he was just kind of like making fun of the situation, and he was even doing it when the police were there. So it was awful, and Donna was like hysterical, so upset, and Grady ended up being arrested, of course, and his trial came up soon after that. And with the trial, I feel like it was just really about making it seem like Grady was, the type of person that was like mentally ill, that he was pushed into alcoholism and pushed into these anger issues because of the way he was brought up. And that might very well be true. He, I'm sure, did not have an amazing upbringing. If violence and all of this runs in his family, if anger issues run in his family, he could have gone through similar issues. But that doesn't mean that you have the right to murder somebody, right? So, this whole trial was about Grady and his lawyer making it seem like to the jury that he was just pushed into alcoholism, and Jack confronted him in the trailer and said like, hey, I really love Donna and there's nothing you could do about it. But the jury did not fall for this, and Donna gave a very emotional testimony about how much she loved Jack and how she was really hurt by Grady and all of the abuse he put her through for all of these years. And the jury really felt for Donna, and they felt it was wrong to kill this young man just because you didn't want your daughter to leave. So the jury talked over it for only like 3 hours, and they found Grady guilty. So Grady was found guilty of third-degree murder, and he was given only 15 years of house arrest. He was given no prison time whatsoever for murder. But the reason for that was because during this time, this prison system that he would have been sent to, because the family was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania during this time, they were not capable of taking care of somebody with that type of condition. They were not able to take care of him, and so they basically said like, you're on house arrest. And Grady had a lot of other health issues as well from such an unhealthy lifestyle, drinking and everything all of these years, and so they just did not have that type of facility to take care of a patient like that. And someone who may have to like go back and forth to the doctor, and Grady was getting older at this point, so he probably would have had frequent doctor visits and things like that. And while you're in prison, they don't just let you sit there and like rot and hurt. They take care of you, right? So no matter what you did, basically. So they were not able to take care of him, so they basically sent him home. But Grady's life, it didn't change enough, because he was still able to travel around and do shows, because that was the only way he was able to make money. And so he was able to still travel, but he was mostly confined to his trailer. And this made him very angry, especially after he remarried Theresa. He divorced Barbara during this time and remarried Theresa, and he basically was angry that like he couldn't leave to go get liquor, whatever he wanted, and so he would take all that out on Theresa, because she would sometimes refuse, because she was, you know, wanting him to quit. She wanted him to be better, because when they first got back together, things were better. And over the years, you know, it started getting worse. He started getting much more abusive again. So she would just go off the rails when she refused, and the abuse just continued for years and years. And in fact, at one point, Grady started sexually assaulting Theresa with like inanimate objects. He would, you know, assault her over and over, and he was just terrible. Like, it just became much more intense and terrible over time. And even at one point, he attacked Theresa and ripped her IUD out of her body. Like, he reached in and like ripped it out. So I couldn't even imagine like the absolute pain, excruciating pain that she felt during that. That is awful. But yeah, Grady just became so much more abusive, and so much more abusive to his children during this time. He would hit them and just beat them all the time, and it was just totally, you know, terrible. Theresa's other son, Henry Glenn Newman Jr., whom she had with her previous husband, Harry, was also working in the carnival. He was the human blockhead, so he would like hammer nails into his head and do all kinds of like really bizarre acts like that, where he would hurt himself. And he really did not care for Grady, because he knew that he was abusive to his other siblings and of course his mother. And so he did not care for Grady. He did not know the level of severity. He did not know that Theresa was being sexually assaulted. He wasn't aware. And so one day Mary just like broke down and told him like, we have to do something about this. I can't deal with this anymore. And in the trial, it kind of made it seem as if Theresa made it seem like just find someone to like get rid of him, to like make him go away. But I don't feel like that was the intention, of course, because that's not what happened. But she gave her son $1,500, and he hired another carnival worker to get rid of Grady. So in November of 1992, this money was given to a worker named Chris Wyant. He was only 17 years old. And on November 29th, 1992, Chris walked into Grady's trailer, and Grady must not have seen him. And while Grady was like watching TV, Chris walked in and shot him 2 times in the back of the head. And this was, I feel like, almost a bizarre payback, because he was killed by a 17-year-old and he murdered a 17-year-old, so that's very bizarre. And also, I just feel like, I don't like to say payback, but it's also, you know, you kind of like get what's coming to you. It's what's, you know, goes up must come down. And so I definitely feel like Grady was not asking for good things in life, because he was so terrible to his family. He was terrible to other people in the carnival. He was just an awful person all around. And so, you know, of course, arrests were made right away, because Grady was found immediately. And Theresa, Chris, and Henry were all 3 arrested immediately, like the next day. Christopher was arrested and he was sentenced to 27 years in prison, but Harry got a really bad sentence. And with his plea to the jury, you know, he made it seem like, I just really wanted to protect my mother, and I do feel like that's true. I do feel like he really cared about his mom. I feel like it really hurt him when he found out the severe abuse she was going through for years and years. And so I definitely feel like he did feel bad for his mother. I don't feel like there was any other reason. Like, it's not like he just disliked Grady because he just didn't, but he felt bad for his mother. But because hiring a hitman is considered premeditated, he did receive first-degree murder, and he was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for about 25 years. And so he got the worst sentence of everybody because he essentially hired the hitman. And Theresa was given manslaughter, and she was sentenced to serve only 12 years in prison. And I feel like the jury went easy on her because she did partake in a murder, but because of the severe abuse she went through, they lessened it and it wasn't as severe, so they gave her a much lessened sentence. And I agree with that, because when you go through that for years and years, I can only imagine that you just want to like get rid of this person and that you want them out of your life. And if you don't see any way out, not saying that that's okay, of course, but I do feel like she was so probably like not thinking straight and being abused every day and probably just like confused that this is the only way she saw out. And I wish that they would have done something different and not gone the murder route, but unfortunately I don't know if a prison would have taken him because of his previous conviction. He didn't even serve prison time for murdering somebody, so I'm not sure like what that would have been like. And she probably knew that. She thought he's not going to go to prison. So I definitely feel for her. Of course I don't ever agree with murdering somebody or anything like that, but I can only imagine what she was going through for all of those years. So I do feel bad for her in a way, but she did serve time, so she definitely, I feel like, served what she deserved, I suppose, for this type of crime. And Grady Jr. III is very adamant about protecting his mother from this. He feels that Theresa did not directly ask Harry to find someone to do this. He felt that Harry overheard Theresa saying like, I have to do something about this, because Grady was threatening to kill all of them. He was, he would be like in a drunken stupor talking about, I'm going to kill my family and things like that. So he feels that Harry heard Theresa say that and then hired the hitman to take out this crime. But I don't really know. It's debated upon. A lot of things in this are debated upon. Of course, the trailer incident where he was talking to Jack is heavily debated upon. So, and this is as well. So I do feel like, we'll never know because we weren't there, right? But I do feel like, I do feel like a lot of it was intentional, but I do think that, I do think a lot of it was intentional, definitely, because I think Theresa was going through a lot and she kind of was like at her end, the end of her rope, and she just didn't know what to do. So I do definitely feel that it was intentional, but her son definitely feels different. And it's fair to note that at his funeral, Grady only had 10 people attend. Only 10 people came to view his body. So I feel like that definitely says something about the type of person he was. Like, not really, hardly anybody came to show up for him. And that's sad in a way, but that really shows the type of person you are if hardly anybody shows up to your funeral. And Grady Jr. III was the only child or person that I could really find a lot of information on. The other children, and as well as Theresa, there's not really a lot about them online. I'm sure that they just really wanted to like separate themselves from this completely and didn't want to be like involved with any of it. But Grady Jr. is, he appears to be trying to work in like the carnival track. He still does that type of stuff. He's been on a few shows, and apparently I'm not sure if this is like still the case, but from clips that I saw, he is with a woman, a bearded woman, so that's nice to find, somebody that you could really connect with, right? Somebody who is into the same things as you, someone who maybe grew up in a similar life, or someone who is understanding of any sort of disability or anything like that. So I thought that that was really nice. But yeah, he was the only person after this case that I could really find any information on. But I hope they're all doing well, and I hope Grady Jr. is doing well also. So let me know what you all think about this case. Do you think that Theresa and Harry should have gotten prison time? What do you think? This case has me real tore up because I really do have a heart for victim, of abuse. So let me know what you all think about this case. Do you think that Harry and Theresa should have been given any prison time? Especially Theresa. I find this really hard because I do feel like victims of abuse really go through a lot, and sometimes they're at a point where they just feel like there's no other option. And of course, murder is, not the answer, but unless someone's like trying to kill you too, of course. But I do feel like, you know, I do feel like it's really like a hard call. Like, I don't think it's okay to murder anybody, but with the severe abuse and everything she went through for all of these years, I do think that she, you know, she just didn't know what to do anymore. She felt like she had to do something, and you know, it's really quite sad to be pushed to that limit, right? So I feel really bad about everybody in this case. I feel bad for Jack, who just found someone he loved. I feel bad for Donna, who had to watch her fiance die the day before their wedding. That's so terrible. And just this whole case was really messed up. It was very bizarre. I purchased like a book about it, and it was very interesting. You guys should check it out. I'll post like a picture of it on the screen. It was very interesting, very like heavily detailed on this case. So let me know what you guys think, and if you want other cases like this, because I thought this was very interesting. And otherwise, I hope you all have a great day and stay safe out there. Bye bye.